teams that have the most draft capital, and I feel more confident in this now, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Colts, the Jets, the Bengals, the Lions, the Browns, and the Chargers. So there's a lot of teams up there that are bad. But what I get drawn to are the teams that aren't that bad that still have a lot of draft capital. And so if I'm ranking those teams, I'm looking here, I'm like, okay, the Colts, they're not that bad. The Lions, they're not that bad. The Browns, honestly, are
the Browns are
bad.
way better than their record was last year.
Not that bad. And so I look at these teams and I'm like, man, there are actually some teams with a ton of draft capital that could legitimately improve their team, and not through the, free agent, I'm going to go sign a big free agent, because that's usually a bunch of fool's gold, but actually building through young talent that can be sustainable.
Yeah, for sure. And it shows that there are opportunities. This is, so no one's discussed this as heavily as us over the past few years, but this is why teams go from worst to first and back, right? All the time. Because there are opportunities to replenish a roster with cheap talent, and whether that cheap talent be trading a 5th round pick for Aqib Talib, as the Rams did once, or the Cowboys trade Michael Bennett, for example. But all these situations, you look at Detroit, right? Detroit are a top 10 team in terms of draft capital. No one else in their division is anywhere close, right? So when you look at them, they're 3-12-1, but a ton of close losses, good quarterback coming back, and a ton of draft capital, including what I think is a premium draft pick at 3 for all the teams that want the non-quarterback. They're in a good spot, and they're a team that could contend. Assuming Patricia and company get their act in gear, like that's a good thing. Obviously, the Colts are another one. They got to figure out who their quarterback is, but they've been stocking up picks for a while now, and I think getting younger and better as a roster. Jacksonville's a team that has a terrible cap situation, right? Yep. So some of this stuff you have to look at in conjunction with those. But again, that's a team that doesn't have a lack of talent. They need a QB, but and then Brown, you look at Cleveland, right? If Cleveland gets things together in the next month or so, signs a couple, I would say mid-tier free agents, and then drafts really well, they could contend.
Absolutely. There are 3 to 4 of these teams that could legitimately contend. I also will say this. I don't think the Dolphins are that far away either. And here's why. There is a world in which the New England Patriots no longer have Tom Brady. And that could get really interesting, right? They could all of a sudden not be a great team anymore.
Right. And the other team in your division is coached by Adam Gase. The other team in your division is a quarterback named Josh Allen. Sorry.
Be nice.
I know.
He's at least top 30.
Yeah. Buckle up. I agree. I think the Dolphins, the honest to God truth is the Dolphins are positioning themselves to have success in the AFC East. I mean, because they see it. They don't. Brady can't play till he's 50, and I think the Bills are one of the. The Bills have one of the best processes in the entire NFL. If you look at the way that they built their roster, defensively back to front, offensively they do the best job they can of hiding Josh Allen, and at the same time it's difficult to hide a quarterback like that for that long. So while I think the Bills, if they got a quarterback, would be amazing, they're always going to be limited by the ceiling of Josh Allen. And then the Jets are just a team that pretty good defensively, but an absolute disaster offensively. So there's a ton of opportunity for the Dolphins.
My favorite thing just about the whole Bills Josh Allen thing is everyone during the draft said, we need to draft this guy because he has a strong arm. He can throw it downfield and he can throw through the wind. And then what they did this year to make him better is they said, actually, we're going to have you throw the ball way shorter because you're so inaccurate throwing the ball downfield.
Well, and I think that's
which isn't, there's not a problem with that, but I just want people to understand that you're full of shit.
Yeah. Well, that's like when they took him ahead of Rosen, which ultimately so far Rosen has not gotten a great shake in the NFL, but he hasn't been good. Allen's been better than Rosen at least, but like Lamar Jackson was another one where it's like, you really traded because they were in such a great position because they had the Chiefs' number 1 pick from the Mahomes deal. They could have used Mahomes, by the way, at 10. Just traded.
How would he have done in Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's a Texas guy. So, and then they traded Cordy Glenn to the Bengals. They had 2 first-round picks in that draft, and they used and they traded two of them up to get Allen and two of them up to get Edwards, Edmonds. Both of them have been like starters for them, but like not reasons to trade up in the draft. No. And so I don't know, man. There are some missed opportunities there, but again, I think from a 1 to 53, they're the best roster in the AFC East right now.
Yes. And so for that reason, the Miami Dolphins with 12 draft picks who have more than one
win above everybody else.
Yeah. So the way that we did this, by the way, is that I should have led with that. Is we basically did an approximation, prediction of what each pick is worth from a WAR perspective. What's your predicted wins above replacement for drafting someone in that with that selection, and then summed them up for all of your draft picks. So the Dolphins have 3.8 expected wins above replacement from their draft picks, which is more than one above the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are in second, and then everyone else is kind of bunched up together. So they have a huge amount of draft capital, more than everyone else. Here's the question, though. If they don't get a quarterback, but they improve their team enough to be decent, are they kicking themselves next year? Or
I think
are they good enough to go sign somebody?
Well, and that sort of shows you how limited you are from the perspective of how limited individual players are to your success. So you talk about 3.8, that's over the 4 years of the rookie contract for most players. So it's less than one win per season. So an entire draft class over what you could ultimately acquire is still not going to move the needle from an average perspective all that much. What does, though, is obviously the quarterback who, the first overall pick, if it's a quarterback, the WAR per season is about 1. So that's really, so if the Dolphins are thinking about, they could do what the Browns did and continue to trade back, but what they shouldn't do is unload all these picks on non-quarterbacks, right? They should, if they're not going to go the quarterback route this year, then go the quarterback route next year. Destine yourself to do that. And again, Fitzpatrick's sort of the perfect quarterback to be competitive, develop players along with, but also to ultimately lose.
Yeah, man. I got to say this though. If someone jumps you to get Tua and you have no chance to get Tua, I would try to just load up on next year's draft capital. Trading Devontae Parker, I'm getting out. I'm getting everything. There's just not. What am I going to do?
Well,
be average.
So Parker and Howard are guys. Although Howard had troubles with the law at the end of the season, but Parker, Howard, obviously they had Christian Wilkins they drafted last year. I mean, some of those players I think are useful for them. You can't just trade everybody, but yeah, I mean the 89 Cowboys did, but the issue is ultimately you're going to need some players on your team, and the problem was defensively they literally had. I mean, the fact that New England lost to them in Week 17 is an atrocity, given that they were basically rolling out 11 replacement players on their team on defense.
All right, let's go to the bottom of this group because there are some interesting things to take away from the people with the teams without draft capital. Let me see if you can pick out the sore thumb here.
Well, the Seahawks.
Can you just let me list them, please?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you. So the teams with the lowest amount of draft capital: the Houston Texans, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Los Angeles Rams, the Chicago Bears, the New Orleans Saints, the Kansas City Chiefs, Tennessee Titans, 49ers, Ravens, Seahawks. There are a few above that. But those teams, that group, what's one team that sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, obviously Seattle does because of their, they just have continuously traded picks over the years. Although last season they did a pretty good job of accumulating some back. They have not, and again, this is not necessarily a skill, but they have not drafted well of late, right? In terms of like the players that they've gotten have not produced for them. But you look at some of these teams, what do we think about the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward?
Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a quarterback at least.
Yeah, but again, it's similar here. Like the Houston Texans have a quarterback too, and the Rams technically have a quarterback too. But like those teams are sort of like for example, how is Goff? Goff is sort of in like this Daltarian like sort of space right now, right? Where if that team takes a significant dive from
fucking rough.
If that team takes a dive from a support standpoint,
wow,
what happens to Goff? And then subsequently, what happens to that team? Because that Bengals team was 12-4 in 2015. And then they're like 7-9-ish 2016. Yeah, now they're the worst team in the NFL. You look at, obviously, Pittsburgh, like they traded for Minka, right? They didn't get a whole lot back for Antonio Brown. Big Ben is probably on his last leg. So, yes, I do agree that they could be okay, but they also won a lot of close games last year.
Mm-hmm.
The one, obviously, that's the worst, and again, I was just scrolling down, obviously, is Chicago, right? I mean, that's the worst one.
It took you 3 minutes to get to the Chicago Bears. But here is the difference between all those teams. Yeah, they're all in shitty situations because they don't have draft capital. That's just a fact. Even if you have Russell Wilson, and granted, the Seahawks have a little more draft capital than those teams at the bottom, like the Texans, Steelers, Rams, Bears, and Saints, and the Chiefs, like you can lump them in there too. But those teams all have a quarterback. Now, it might not be a quarterback that's going to play for the next 5 years, but the Bears don't even have a quarterback that you're like excited about. So to have no draft capital, man, to have no draft capital and no quarterback is a really bad place to be in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, because where do you get out? You
have no. Is there a team in a worse position?
In the NFL, no. I mean, the Bears are the league's most troubled team. The only thing that they have is that maybe Matt Nagy's a good coach.
Yes, and maybe a good quarterback. Can you play both?
I don't know. And a few things also here.
Would you rather have Mitch Trubisky play quarterback and coach, or have Matt Nagy play quarterback and coach?
Nagy, because you can noodle arm these balls to what's his face, to Tariq Cohen. Also, notice here, they're in bad company in their own division, right? Minnesota, Green Bay, partly a product of how well they played last year, how good their records were, but they don't have great draft capital. Detroit, by virtue of how poorly they played last year, but also, the fact that they have their own 7 picks. But so again, we talk about, okay, every single year there seems to be a worst to first, or a team like San Francisco, which goes from third to Super Bowl. Like, how do you do that? Well, you do that. Well, what was San Francisco's formula this year? Quarterback comes back from injury, defense gets a lot better, and you play a third to fourth place schedule, right? Like, to me, if I'm looking at
a lot of turnovers.
Right, and you get turnover luck, right? Whereas the Detroit Lions, we're not a turnover generating machine. If you are a fan of one team that might go worst to first, I think Detroit's the one that has a chance this year.
Yeah, especially because they're going to listen to me and take 2 at 3.
Well, they're
going to go worst to first in the long run.
Yeah,
which is ultimately what matters more.
Because if you look at that entire division's in a tricky quarterback situation. Like, Rodgers is not getting any better. In fact, there are some people, and we sort of agree with them,
in fact, he's getting significantly worse.
He's getting significantly worse. The Vikings, Kirk Cousins is not somebody. Kirk is the exact quarterback we were just talking about with Burrow versus Mayfield. You get him Stefanski, and he plays pretty damn well for a couple months. You get him DiFilippo, he looks horrible, right? Like, Stefanski's gone, right? He's on the sort of lame duck season of his contract. Like, you could also make an argument that just taking Tua puts you unequivocally in the best quarterback situation in your own division, yes, which is a place to be, right?
I think you could legitimately say that unless you are a team like the Chiefs, who has the best quarterback in the league by a mile and is young, there's no better position to be in than having a young guy who could potentially be a number 1 pick and a guy who's later on in his career who's still playing at a high level. So
here's a question just to piggyback off that, because I was thinking, okay, you take Tua, you have Stafford, right? And one of those, those 2 players are going to have value for a while. Matt Patricia is 9 and 23-1 or whatever he is as an NFL head coach. Mm-hmm. If you're a Lions fan, what do you want to happen more? Do you think that the ceiling is relatively high with Patricia? Or is it sort of like the John Fox thing where you take Trubisky 1 year, stink for another year, get a new head coach, and then pop up, right, as a part of like the regime change? Or because that's really the only thing. If you're a Lions fan and you're like, okay, when is this team going to be good? Like, you have the head coach is really the question, right? They got rid of Caldwell. 3 out of his 4 seasons were winning seasons. They get Patricia, and so far all they've done is bottom out.
Oh, look, they're building for the future. The bottom line with this draft capital thing is that there are some teams that have traditionally been very good, like the Rams and the Steelers, who they don't have a lot of ways to retool, and there are some legitimate questions there at the quarterback position. The Texans are tricky because they don't have those questions, but they have leveraged a ton to try and build an environment around Deshaun Watson, and then you have the Bears, who we've talked about.
Yep.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.